Yo, hey, and welcome back here to another week of NFL DFS. We are talking NFL Week 14 already at this point in the season, and this is the DFS slate playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. We're going to break down this upcoming Sunday's main slate. I'll give you my favorite plays, in my opinion, guys that you should be including into your lineups to hopefully build the best lineups for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. So whether you play on DraftKings or FanDuel, you should find this video useful. So sit back, relax, and let's talk some NFL Week 14 DFS. Yo, what's up, guys, and welcome back here to the channel. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, I appreciate you guys finding your way here to this video, to this channel. It does mean a lot. A lot of you guys have been following me for most of the season, and I do really appreciate it. And we're going to keep it the same here. We're going to break down this week's Week 14's NFL DFS slate by using the Daily Fantasy Nerd Optimizer. We'll talk about, through the dashboard, some of my favorite plays, some of the plays that they're recommending from a raw point perspective, from a value perspective, and of course the guys that I personally like and that I'm trying to fit into my lineups for this upcoming Sunday. If you guys haven't already checked out Daily Fantasy Nerd, you truly are missing out. You can get a free trial, and at this point, you may get it for most of the remainder of the season, but it is linked down below in the description of this video. I definitely recommend it. I've had, success not only this season, for most of this season, to be honest with you guys, but, for the last couple of years. This is an optimizer that I've used for a long time. I really like it. You guys can see firsthand here how the dashboard works, how easy it is to sort through players, favorite players, build lineups, all that good stuff. So make sure you check it out. It is my favorite, of course, optimizer, and I do recommend it to anyone else, truly in the DFS industry. Now, for this particular week, for Week 14, it's an unusual week, in my opinion, in terms of the Vegas totals. There's some huge disparity between those games that have low totals, or just really all games, and then those games that stand out in terms of a higher total. And you can see right here from Daily Fantasy Nerd, they break it down for you. But the 4 games in which there is a higher total, and I'm not even talking about a total over 50, but just in general on this particular slate, relative to this slate, higher total is Dallas, Washington, Las Vegas, Kansas City, San Francisco, Cincinnati, and Buffalo at Tampa Bay. Now, 3 of those games are 48, with the Buffalo-Tampa Bay game being the only game on this slate with a total over-under above 50. So all of those, of course, are of interest in terms of picking players, picking stacks, finding players that are a part of games where a lot of points should be scored. But in general, as I mentioned, a lot of those other games, if not all of the other games on this slate, have really low totals, and that's what makes this an unusual week. So you can see here, Houston's at 41.5, Carolina is at 42.5, Cleveland at 42, Denver at 42. Some really, really low totals. Just make sure you guys are aware of that. I'm not saying stay away from those games. I'm definitely going to be recommending players from those games. But in general, you always want to consider Vegas as you enter your lineups, as you pick your players, all that good stuff. So make sure you do that here. Daily Fantasy Nerd lays it out very, very easy and keeps it up to date for us as we go through this video. But in general, I won't waste any more of your time. The only thing I ask as we jump forward here is to please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I know you guys have, a lot of you guys have been subscribed to the channel for this season, for previous seasons. I do really appreciate it. But please, if you haven't already, make sure you are a part of, subscribing to this channel. It means a lot to me. It helps this channel grow. But more importantly, I have been, over the last few weeks, putting out short videos. So YouTube has those 15-second videos where I'm actually going to run the optimizer. You guys aren't going to get notified unless you are subscribed to this channel when I put those videos out, because I only put them out a couple hours before lock, and that's so that the optimizer is as close to it needs to be in terms of the start of games, in terms of injuries and everything else that can funnel into the stats there. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you will get those short notifications. But I won't waste any more time. We're going to jump straight into the quarterback position here. And like every week, we're going to start by breaking down the top 5 at the position in terms of raw projected points to be scored. That's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and Dak Prescott. In terms of value, things do change up this week a little bit. You can see here Taysom Hill, Cam Newton, Dak Prescott, Taylor Haneke, and Derek Carr round out the top 5 for value. And by the way, we're alternating weeks here. This week I will be focusing on DraftKings pricing, but of course a lot of this analysis, a lot of these plays do translate to FanDuel, but just keep that in mind. Each and every week we're going to flip-flop here. In terms of guys that I like, some of those guys already mentioned, but in no particular order. I'll give you, I like Dak Prescott, Hill, Brady, Mahomes, and Jackson. Now, the guys I want to talk to or talk towards here a little bit more in detail includes Lamar Jackson first and foremost. Now, this is a play. He has not been playing well. We're talking 3+ weeks, but for most of this season, Lamar Jackson has not been the Lamar Jackson we've seen in the past, both from a MVP standpoint in the NFL and generally from a fantasy perspective. But he is only $7,400 now on DraftKings. I think that's very, very attractive. He's coming off of a tough loss in Pittsburgh. Cleveland is coming off of a bye, and in week 12, although they won, Baltimore did not put up, and Lamar Jackson did not put up a good performance against Cleveland at home. Now they're traveling to Cleveland this week. Again, Cleveland off of a bye. All this sounds terrible. Why am I recommending Lamar Jackson? Well, just truly, I don't believe he can continue to do this. He had a pretty bad game, throwing 4 interceptions that week, only threw for 165 yards with 1 touchdown. They found a way to win that game. He didn't look great again in Pittsburgh. He didn't look great in Miami, but he has still that huge upside. And he historically has absolutely destroyed Cleveland, both on the road and at home. You can see dating back to last season in 2020, put up 38 points against Cleveland. You can remember that game where he left for whatever reason, came back, won the game. And then earlier that season in week 1 at home, put up 28 points on DraftKings. So Lamar Jackson clearly has that upside. He gives you a ton on the ground. You'd like to see his rushing attempts go up a little bit more. That has been the only downside in terms of fantasy over the last few weeks. It's drastically up and down. He did have 17 rushing attempts versus Cleveland, though, and that's what I want to focus in on. When he has 17, 15 plus rushing attempts, he gives you such a great floor and such a tremendous amount of upside as a rushing quarterback. He can easily take care of it, obviously, on the ground. He does do it through the air, too. I don't want to hear the haters about he's only a running back. Obviously, this guy has a tremendous talent, a tremendous asset. He has finally receivers that are healthy, including Bateman's back. He's been playing well. He has Mark Andrews, who he loves to throw to. He has Marquise Brown. It's not the most elite cast, but it's certainly now a healthy cast for Baltimore here. I like Lamar Jackson. I like him at the price, but most importantly, he's going to be one of the lower owned quarterbacks on this slate. A lot of people will be gravitating towards some of these guys I'll mention here in a second, but Lamar Jackson at like sub 5%, playing Cleveland, divisional game. They are leading the division. They need to get some wins here. I love Lamar Jackson this week versus Cleveland. I think it's a great opportunity to buy low on a guy that's going to be lower owned and has that tremendous upside. So that's where I'll be going for my number 1 quarterback likely this week. It's a guy I want to recommend to you guys. Other guys here very quickly. I'll start with Taysom Hill, and I won't spend too much time here. Obviously a great matchup this week, playing on the road versus the Jets. Jets are bad versus everything, right? They are bottom 10, bottom 5 against the pass, against the rush, against quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points given up per game. All the numbers in terms of basically anything you can imagine, the Jets defense gives it up, right? Taysom Hill is an interesting case, right? He is playing on the road. They are favorites. But the interesting part here is, if you watched last week, he looked pretty bad from a passing perspective, but still finished top 10. I think it was actually 7th overall at the position at quarterback with 4 interceptions. He put up 28 fantasy points versus Dallas. Looked, again, really bad. Didn't even complete 50% of his passes, but still threw for 260 plus yards, and more importantly, had 100 rushing yards. And if you go back to some of his previous stats, that's not unusual, right? He has put up 21, 25, 19, and 26 fantasy points on DraftKings here. When he gets to start, the dude has that floor with the rushing capabilities. He's going to run the ball a lot. He's going to give you a lot on the ground. I think he is a great value. It's one of those things where, and at $5,600, and I believe the price is even better on FanDuel, it's he's going to be owned, right? He's going to be one of the higher owned quarterbacks, but it's one of those things where does it really matter how high he is owned? If you want to play him, go ahead and do it. I think it's a great play. It's a great value play, and you can differentiate your lineup elsewhere. He doesn't have to do a lot in terms of passing the ball. If he gets you 250 and a couple touchdowns through the air and offers 100+ yard upside through on the ground, obviously that's an incredible play at $5,600. Don't get cute. Taysom Hill, definitely a great play this week. I do like Dak Prescott. I won't spend too much more time here. I know these videos need to be in and out for you guys to see what does come out in terms of lineups this week. But Dak Prescott versus Washington. Washington's defense this season has been really bad, if not bottom 5 versus versus the pass this season. They lost, obviously, Chase Young, so their pass rush is much worse. Dak Prescott is one of the few quarterbacks on the slate that has a positive advantage from an O-line, D-line perspective, pass advantage, so he shouldn't see too much pressure. Again, Chase Young is now out of that defensive front, so it should be even better there. In terms of his wide receivers, elite weapons versus a pretty weak secondary overall in Washington. CeeDee Lamb is in an incredible spot. Standalone, one of my favorite receivers on the slate, but obviously with Dak Prescott here, him and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's interesting because he's coming off of COVID, but is expected to play. Nonetheless, I do like Dak Prescott as one of my favorite plays. I do like Tom Brady again this week. $7,600, so the price is a little bit worse, obviously, than Dak Prescott. But Brady's coming off a great game versus Atlanta. Threw the ball, continues to have that heavy volume, even when they are destroying teams. But threw the ball 51 times last week versus Atlanta. The game was close for maybe a quarter or two, but he ran away with it. 4 total touchdowns through the air. Again, it's Tom Brady. I don't need to spend too much time here. I think it's one of those competitive games where he's going to go lower owned, but it's one of those games where he's going to show up, right? He's playing at home versus Buffalo. Buffalo's coming off of that weird game last week. We'll see how it plays out, but more importantly, it's one of the higher, if it is the highest over-under game, and I believe basically these two teams are projected, or Tampa Bay is projected as one of the highest overall scoring teams on the slate from a point perspective from Vegas. So Tom Brady, great play, including that volume and everything I just mentioned. Last but not least here, you gotta love Patrick Mahomes when he is one of the lowest projected owned quarterbacks on the slate. A couple of weeks ago, week 10, absolutely finally came out basically in week 10 to put up the performances we come to expect from him. 400 plus yards through the air, 5 total touchdowns, 5 passing touchdowns, I should say, putting up nearly 40 fantasy points on DraftKings here. And again, he's going to be lower owned. He's been really up and down the season. He hasn't been the Patrick Mahomes we know. He is $8,000, but I do like him this week versus Las Vegas. Divisional game, Kansas City coming off of a bye. Las Vegas has not been great in terms of, their defensive front is really good, but overall has not been too great in terms of preventing the pass. And again, it's Patrick Mahomes. Don't need to spend too much time here. I do like him. Again, it's one of those lower ownership plays. Him and Lamar Jackson at sub 5% is just beautiful from a DFS perspective, and I think you should take advantage of that. Obviously, elite weapons. Las Vegas has been struggling in general over the last few weeks. I love him, and I love the fact that they are also projected, I believe, the highest over-under, or highest point total for a team from Vegas at 28.8. You can see it here. There are huge favorites, but that typically doesn't matter for Patrick Mahomes. I do like Patrick Mahomes. So those are the guys I like in particular. Some of those match up with raw points that we just showed, but in general, those are the guys I will be likely fitting into my lineups. Love to hear from you guys down below if I'm off base on any of those particular plays. If you guys need to see any more information, please let me know, but we will bounce over to the running back position here. Same deal. In terms of fantasy points, expected raw points, you're talking Austin Eckler, Kamara, Fournette, Mixon, and Gibson rounding out the top 5. In terms of value here, it's similar guys, but you have Gibson, Jacobs, Eckler, Williams, that's Javonte Williams, and Saquon Barkley for the top 5 value plays according to points in Daily Fantasy Nerd here. Now, you can see a lot of these guys I like, right? Number one guy I like on this slate is Austin Eckler. He's the first, since this new format of this video, he's the first running back to make the actual cover page. So obviously I really like him this week. Projected a good amount of points, 26.5. They are favorites by a huge margin at -10. You can see here Los Angeles Chargers playing the Giants, and the Giants in general, you can see, have just been really bad against the run. They give up above average in terms of points, in terms of yards per carry versus the rush. They're plus 9% here according to Daily Fantasy Nerd, but more importantly, that obviously translates to a plus 10% matchup for a running back. Defense first position here, they give up a lot of points. And then Eckler himself, although he hasn't had the best of a season, he has that upside, right? We've seen him put up 32 plus fantasy points multiple times this season, including almost a 42-point game on DraftKings versus Pittsburgh. I believe this is just another great matchup at home versus the Giants. Huge favorite, but more importantly, why I like him is because you're going to see the absence of Keenan Allen, who went through COVID protocols and will not be able to play. He's been rolled out already. Mike Williams is still questionable, but looking like he'll play. So some of the weapons available in the passing game are not going to be there. And as a result, I like Austin Eckler to see a little bit more volume here, both on the ground and through the air. Alvin Kamara is in play this week. I won't spend a lot of time on him. It's a great matchup. In the similar token that you saw Taysom Hill, it's even a better matchup for running backs. The Jets, the New York teams in general just really bad versus the run. But the Jets in particular are, I believe, the worst team at this point in terms of DVOA, in terms of a grade from Pro Football Focus. All the things you want to see for a running back matchups exist this week for Alvin Kamara and for New Orleans. I really love the matchup here. They are a favorite. Now, 5-point favorite on the road. I don't always like to take a running back on the road. And Kamara, this is the only hesitation, is coming off a several-week absence. Hasn't played since week 9 due to injury. Will Hill probably steal some of his red zone work? Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing. Again, be careful here, but he's $7,900 and gives you a ton of upside. Obviously, it's Alvin Kamara, and Mark Ingram is out, so not much competition in that backfield, and Kamara is playing. Antonio Gibson, the ridiculous amount of workload he has been getting from Washington is just something you want to take advantage of each and every week, and he's only $6,000. That's what stands out here. He continues to be a value play both on FanDuel and on DraftKings, but particularly here on DraftKings, and his workload is crazy. 23 rushing attempts in week 13 with 6 targets. So he's pushing 30 plus opportunities, both on the ground, that's rushing attempts plus targets each and every week for the last few weeks. So we want to take advantage of that. We want to get a guy that's going to get all the volume in the world, including passing game volume, and that is this guy here in Antonio Gibson. Again, really good price tag on him. Dallas is pretty tough as a defensive front, but again, you're talking the average volume here. He's averaging 17 over his last 3 games, 17 plus rushing attempts, and over 3 targets a game. Those targets have even been better the last couple of weeks. Other guys, I think Josh Jacobs is one of my favorite plays this week at running back. He has finally seen a workload that we kind of expected really since his rookie season, I guess. But he's starting to get more and more opportunity. A lot of guys in that backfield are either questionable or ruled out already, meaning Josh Jacobs should see a workhorse type of workload this week. In particular, he's getting finally volume in the passing game. He's playing third down. He had 9 targets in week 13. I mean, that's unusual for Josh Jacobs. We'll take it, and it's starting to trend that way. Week 11, he had 7. Week 10, he had 5. Week 12, he had 4. Week, obviously, 13, he had 9. He's catching all of them. That's what we want to see, right? And we want to see, hopefully, 15 plus rushing attempts. Plus, let's take 5, and he's going to get 20 attempts at $6,200. I like those opportunities for Josh Jacobs this week. It's lining up to be a great matchup, although on the road here, again, we're seeing passing work volume for him, so that doesn't hurt him too much here. Versus Kansas City. Kansas City, traditionally, you attack them on the ground. That's basically how you beat Kansas City, and Josh Jacobs should be a part of that game plan here for Las Vegas. I'm going to try to move very quickly here through the rest. Javonte Williams does stand out. An incredible matchup. Detroit is, again, similar to the Jets, one of the worst teams in DVOA in terms of Pro Football Focus's grading, in terms of yards per carry, in terms of basically yards in general that they give up to running backs and points. One of the worst teams, if not bottom 3 in the NFL this season, and they don't have their own running back in Swift. So it's going to be an ugly game in my opinion. Denver is a huge favorite at -8.5, projected a healthy 25 points. Again, all the metrics line up for running backs versus them. The only downside is how many attempts will he get? He got 23 last week. If we can get that this week, I will take that all day, right? It's a great play here at $5,900, but in general, it has been up and down, right? Depending on Melvin Gordon playing and how much opportunity he gets, that's the only downside for Williams. He's one of the better running backs in the league. I think he leads the league in yards after contact or some crazy, advanced metrics that just stand out for him as a guy that doesn't even get a full workhorse workload. Just shows how talented he is. So hopefully we can get 15 plus opportunities out of him this week, and if that's the case for Detroit, you'll take that. Saquon Barkley, again, another great matchup for a running back here. The Chargers all year long have just leveraged points, leveraged yards, rushing yards, been really, really incapable of stopping the run all season. So if there's a game for Saquon Barkley to explode in, this is it. Now, he hasn't done it yet this season, hasn't really even gotten 20 rushing attempts. Will we see it this week? Hopefully, but I do have some interest in Saquon this week in a great matchup. And last but not least here, obviously McCaffrey, last two. McCaffrey is out, so Hubbard is back in play this week. Had a good week 8 as the lead guy, 24 rushing attempts. Hopefully they go back to that this week. Again, he's capped a little bit here by Cam Newton and some of the red zone rushing attempts he may lose, but I do like him. Jeff Wilson is a guy that stands out, but this is a risky play. So it's, who's out? I believe Mitchell is out. So it's Jeff Wilson, or let me show you guys really quickly. You're going to have to make a call here, and I'm going with Jeff Wilson. But in terms of running backs, it's Hasty or Jeff Wilson. I'm going with Jeff Wilson this week. I believe he's going to be the guy to get the workload here. He was in the earlier part of the season, but his price tag is $4,400. I mentioned already, Mitchell is out. He's been the guy that's been getting the workload. Sermon is out. He's been the rookie that really hasn't done much this season. Obviously, Mostert is out from the early part of the season. But I believe Jeff Wilson is the play this week, although it is a risky play considering you don't know what can happen with that San Francisco backfield. So those are my favorite plays. I spent a little bit more time than I probably wanted there, but we will jump quickly over to wide receivers, and I promise not to spend as much time. In terms of top 5, you're talking Tyreek Hill, Diggs, Godwin, Lamb, and Evans. Guys projected to be the most in terms of raw fantasy points. For value, you are talking, this is interesting, Palmer, Mike Williams, Guyton. I'll give you a couple more here. All the Los Angeles Chargers receivers due to Keenan Allen's absence. But then you have Tyreek Hill, Diggs, Godwin, and Evans. So similar guys as the raw in terms of what's showing up for value. I do like some of these guys that were just mentioned. In terms of my favorites for the week, obviously pair up your wide receivers, those guys that get the most targets with your quarterbacks that I mentioned. I believe Taysom Hill can be run freely by himself. That's kind of a side note there. But in general, CeeDee Lamb is probably my favorite receiver on this slate. It's an incredible matchup. I mentioned Washington all season long has been really bad against the pass, but in particular, guys that have run inside receiver routes. And I will admit, CeeDee Lamb has not been that guy this season. He's run primarily outside, except for last week. He played the majority of his snaps as inside receiver when Michael Gallup returned. So I believe in terms of Dallas's lineup, they are in the position they want to be. They're healthy in terms of wide receivers. Guys are playing where they want them to play. So let's take advantage of that. I believe CeeDee Lamb is going to explode this week as an inside receiver versus Washington. Even if he plays outside, it's still a great matchup. Amari Cooper, same deal. You just want to play guys against Washington. Mike Williams is the guy, in my opinion. Obviously, you want to play from the Chargers' perspective with Keenan Allen ruled out already, although there are other guys that stand out as value, but Mike Williams would be that guy. Really explosive guy, right? He's a guy that gets, earlier part of the season was incredible, really died out because he has that big play upside, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But Mike Williams is definitely a guy that should see a target increase with Keenan Allen out. DJ Moore's in play this week. T. Higgins in play this week. Ayuk's in play this week. Now, Ayuk's in play because of the injury to Deebo Samuel, obviously. Deebo Samuel is questionable. I can't imagine they play him this week. If they do, then probably come down on Ayuk. But if they don't, he's the #1 receiver for that team right now. I mentioned the Chargers are looking for other receivers, right? Keenan Allen's out. You could go with a couple of guys here, Guyton, Joshua Palmer. Joshua Palmer's getting a lot of headlines right now. He's $3,000, basically bare minimum on DraftKings. Take a chance here if you want. He should get an increased opportunity, should get more snaps, all that good stuff here. He has played this season. Obviously, he isn't the main target or top 2 or 3 targets on this team, but Joshua Palmer is a guy that you can get some incredible value in as long as he gets the snaps and gets the volume here. So those are the receivers I like this week, and we will wrap things up by jumping over to tight end. Same deal here. In terms of guys that are projected to score the most raw points, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Rob Gronkowski, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts. It's really the same 5 guys every week as long as they're on the slate. But in terms of value, some other guys stand out here. Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Travis Kelce, Everett, and Kittle are the guys that stand out for value. For the guys that I'm particularly interested in, I'll give you 3 here. The #1 guy is actually Austin Hooper, who I do not like playing any of the tight ends, really anybody from Cleveland. I just don't. I think the situation there is just too messed up. But in general, I do like Austin Hooper this week because he is $3,400, very, very cheap. And Njoku is out, and I believe their other tight end is questionable, doubtful already. So Austin Hooper likely is going to be the only tight end available for them, at least from an experience perspective. So he should get some targets. He should get some volume. He has been really bad this season for the most part, but again, he hasn't been alone, and he is alone this week. Njoku's taken a lot of that volume. They want to run double tight ends. They want to run the ball, so Austin Hooper sets up nicely this week versus Baltimore. Baltimore runs 2 high safeties, so in general, I believe that typically favors the tight ends, and Austin Hooper stands out. I like the other side of the ball here, though, or the other side of the game here in Mark Andrews. The situation with Mark Andrews is simple. Cleveland, and you can debate me as much as you want, if you're playing a legitimate tight end, if they are playing a legitimate tight end, I should say, and I'm not talking about some random guys that just are not involved in offenses. I'm talking about your Mark Andrews, your Travis Kelce's, your Wallers, all those types of players. 9 times out of 10, those tight ends go off or have great games versus Cleveland. They are just they have not had the ability to stop the tight end for several years. I don't know if they don't game plan for them or whatever, but as long as it's a legitimate tight end that is part of the offense in terms of their passing game, you can leverage that situation versus Cleveland, and it just works. It just works time and time again. Look at Mark Andrews here, week 12, had 10 targets, only had 4 catches, but scored a touchdown, 65 yards, 16 plus points. If you go back to week 14 of last year, again, 5 of 6, 78 yards. Go back to week 1, 22 plus fantasy points, 5 of 6, 58 yards, multiple touchdowns. He's obviously Lamar Jackson's main man in terms of that passing game. I do like Mark Andrews this week. Last but not least here, if you're looking for some other value, which I still like Austin Hooper more, but Dawson Knox even got 6 targets in that ridiculous game versus Patriots last week. But nonetheless, he has been a part of this offense surprisingly more and more each and every week. Obviously, Diggs and Beasley are the main guys to take from that offense, but $5,000, I think you can do worse probably with this price range at tight end, and I do like him this week as somewhat of a value play, and that's really it for tight ends. You can play anyone right at tight end. Any of the guys I mentioned for the top 5 in projected points. Pair your guys with your tight ends with your quarterbacks, all that good stuff. But if you want some guys that stand out to me, these are the 3. And that really wraps it up. Hopefully, again, you guys find these videos useful. I'm trying to keep them under 20 minutes. I don't know if I can ever talk for less than 20 minutes, but hopefully we did this week. Hopefully, again, you guys find it useful. Please make sure, as I mentioned, you are subscribed to the channel. Leave me some comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Make sure you are subscribed because I will be publishing some short videos tomorrow, 15-second clips on YouTube, where I will run the optimizer with some of the guys, some of the quarterbacks, some of the stacks I talked about in this video. So if you want to see the optimizer in action, if you want to see what it's plugging out in terms of plays, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also, make sure you like these videos if they are helpful. And that wraps it up. Again, I wish you guys the best of luck tomorrow in Week 14 DFS. Leave me some comments down below of guys you are playing. And with that said, again, good luck, and I'll catch you in the next video.